All right, everybody. Hey, I am joined by SBS Silver Bar Stacker. Hi, Silver Bar Stacker. How are you?
Hey, how you doing? Morning, T.
Hello, Silver fans. This is T, and you're in the place to be for silver education, acquisition, and entertainment. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody. Whether you're new to vintage silver or a veteran collector, get ready to geek out on two guys talking vintage silver bars, showing off lots of silver eye candy, and providing valuable info on this niche in the world of silver stacking. If you appreciate the effort, give a thumbs up, and if you're new here, be sure to subscribe.
All right. Thanks for coming on with me. And I decided I was going to do a video on silver bars. I was asked by the guys in my coin club, of all places, to talk a little bit about silver bars and vintage and collectability. And although we talk mostly about coins, you can't go to a coin show without, and by the way, I have my little cigar box of bars that I figured, well, let me pull these out and we could talk and you can share your expertise with me, and the other benefactors of your wisdom will not only be the guys in my coin club, but why not shoot a video and put it all together and let everybody see it? So that's what we're doing.
All right, sounds good, T. Yeah, it's a very deep rabbit hole you can go down, is what I always like to say when it comes to vintage. So, is that box over there just your stash of vintage bars, or?
Yeah, this is a little stash of, and it's kind of heavy, a little stash of vintage bars that I have going on, and I figured, well, I'll pull them out one at a time, and we'll kind of chat about each one and kind of go from there. But I see, I'm looking at your screen, I'm seeing some very similar stuff. But before we even get into the silver, my friend, how long have you been on YouTube?
Well, I've only been on YouTube for a couple of years, so I'm relatively new to the YouTube and stacking community. But like most stackers, I just kind of got into it because I was into the idea of just putting something away tangible, putting away some savings, and that's really what it's all about, is kind of stacking and preserving value. And so when I started stacking, I didn't really get into vintage right away. I was very, much just into stacking generic bullion, larger things like 100-ounce bars, and I even had like an industrial generic bar back in the day. But you start to get bored of just stacking kind of the same thing, and so I think that's where vintage kind of comes in. Eventually, people sort of go down that rabbit hole or go down the coin rabbit hole. There's very many different rabbit holes that you can go down. So really, this is just just a hobby of, it's just so interesting. There's new things that you're finding out every day. You think that there's all the information out there, but there's not. I mean, there's new information that comes up every day. So I just find it very interesting, honestly.
Same here. I mean, it checks two boxes. Box number one, check. You're putting silver back, and you're adding to your wealth and you're saving. That's box number one. But box number two, check, is the fact that it's interesting. It gets boring, stacking up tubes and tubes and tubes of buffaloes, or even American Silver Eagles or anything else for that matter. And you've got some variety here. Let's talk a little bit. Let's start. I see your stuff there, and I don't see, as I'm looking at your screen, I don't see one of these P-lopes here. Are you pretty familiar with these?
Well, I'm somewhat familiar with them. It's such a beautiful looking bar, right? It's a gorgeous,
very attractive, and I think this is kind of like a gateway bar for a lot of guys.
It is. And just the inherent beauty of it, it just sells at the premium, because everybody wants that beautiful bar. So that's a little bit about that bar. I mean, it's not something that I go too crazy with, but it's a bar that I do love. And it's a bar that I feel like is easy for people who are getting new into vintage. It's an easy one for them to put in their stack.
Yeah, you could go into any coin shop pretty much and usually you could see one or two of these, although I would say less than you might have found 5 years ago. It seems like over the last 5 years, there's been an explosion in interest in vintage. And I was talking to a shop owner who owns a brick and mortar store, and he said that one of the ways that he got started was the idea that the old timers just treated these as just regular silver, generic, didn't matter, no premium. He went up around snatching up as much vintage as he possibly could. And then when the market and collectors realized that these were drying up and they're cool and they're desirable, and things changed, supply and demand, the supply started going down, the demand started going up. He really multiplied his money by actively seeking these out 8 years ago or so. And good for him for kind of having that foresight. And but we talked, you mentioned something about the mintage. You are more familiar than I am with the website allengelhard.com.
Yeah.
You go on there from time to time?
Yeah, I have it open right now. I pretty much always have that website open as a tab because I'm always using it as a resource to just verify things. Like I checked just a few bars mintages today because I picked them up and I just wanted to verify. So I was literally just, as you were saying that, I was like, let's just go to the 10-ounce weight class Engelhard bar section and figure it out. So now when you go to All Engelhard, basically my go-to process whenever I'm trying to look up a bar there, especially when it comes to an Engelhard or a Johnson Matthey bar, is I'll just go straight to allengelhard.com, and then on the very top you'll see a little tab that says the definitive pages. And so that's going to be kind of your home page, your main place to go every time that you want to look up a specific bar type, because when it comes to Engelhard and Johnson Matthey, they basically have everything cataloged there. So
I have a confession that All Engelhard website, to me, it's a little bit hard and clunky to navigate. I've been on it before, and I definitely send everybody that I can there as a resource. And here's another one, by the way, to take a gander at. This one.
And that looks like a little bit more uncommon.
Yeah. This is I'm trying to remember where I picked this one up, but with the little bull logo on the left-hand side of Engelhard there, the little circle with the little horns.
So that bull logo is an indicator that that's like a Canadian style bar. You'll see those bullhead logos on the at least on the poured bars. I mean, you got some bullhead logos on pressed bars that are not Canadian, so it gets confusing. But on these 10-ounce poured bars, I know that here's a 100-ounce bar, for example, and this is a Canadian style, and you see the bullhead logo there as well.
Yeah. So, wow. That's a. Hey, do you have a brick and mortar shop or?
Not, and I just feel it's not really a smart thing, especially in California. I mean, it's very expensive to run a brick and mortar shop.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about, I mean, people really think that, there's so much money to be made on buying and selling silver. I'm not sure how these shops, unless these shops have been in business for decades, and they're just having to worry about coming up with the taxes, the property taxes every month. I'm really not sure how these shops, and I'm sure a lot of them are able to stay afloat, because it's hard to pay those bills on the margins that these shops work with. And most of these shops are not dealing in collectibles, so their margins are not really high per unit. So they're really relying on moving volume at very thin margins with a lot of competition. I mean, it's very easy to get a good price silver online now.
Yeah, and to your point about being open for a while, a lot of I would say a good chunk of the shops that I visit as I travel around and interview people, it's generational. Someone's dad or grandpa opened the shop years ago, and and it's still running, and they found a way to make money. A lot of them, as a matter of fact, speaking of that, you're on Whatnot, I'm on Whatnot. A lot of even the shops are going on to Whatnot and selling on there, and that's become a bigger and bigger and bigger chunk of their income is selling online through that platform. And by the way, for anybody who's interested in going to Whatnot, SBS goes on Whatnot. I go on Whatnot. Information will be in the video description. Here's a fun little one. Take a look at this one. You can see
nice.
a little 5-ouncer.
Yeah,
you can even see the pour lines there around the perimeter of the bar. And
that's a beauty.
You know what? The 5-ouncers are tough.
They are tough. There's considerably fewer 5-ounce Engelhard bars out there, and even when it comes down to the press variations, like this is a relatively common bar. I mean, not common, but compared to the bar in your hand, it's a very common compared to that.
Yeah.
And even these will sell for close to $300 for a 5-ounce bar.
Oh yeah.
And the bar in your hand, yep, there you go, right in the original factory seal there too.
Yeah.
These bars just sell at crazy premiums. The poured bar in your hand, I just saw a big slew of 5-ounce poured bars, Engelhard bars that came on the market, probably from some collector who had kind of unloaded them. And boy, they've all been selling for I mean, I think 400 plus. I mean, they go for good money. So that is a nice bar that you have in your hand. I don't know the exact mintage. There's a few variations there, but not many.
Yeah. You know what? I kind of grimaced a little bit when I paid up for this one, but I knew, in my travels, I rarely ever see these things. So it's one of those things, when you see it, you want it, you better get it, or else you might not ever see it again. And I kind of learned that the hard way with, Libertads. I'm a Libertad fanatic, and I bought the key date slabbed for $350, and I winced making that purchase as well. And I kind of kick myself now for not buying more, because they're like $1,200 now.
Yeah, like I was doing an auction. I was going after an item on auction. It was one of those very rare USVI ingot company bars, right? And it was one of the rare variations. So the people who knew what it was knew what it was. And I saw 2 of these on the market. I was like, I'm going to get both of these. I was adamant I was going to get both of these. And so last week I picked one up. I paid close to $200 for a single ounce of silver.
Whoa.
And I was like, should I have done this? I'm not sure. And now a second one of these came on the market, and beautiful Canadian 10-ouncer there.
Oh, thanks.
That's a 5,000 minted Canadian bullhead logo bar there.
This one is 5,000 only?
Yep.
Wow. Yep. I mean, that's for the number of guys that collect Engelhard. And I didn't realize it was that rare.
It's a diamond in the rough. Yeah, it's a diamond in the rough, because it's a pressed bar, so you wouldn't think, oh, it's that rare, but actually the estimated mintage is very low on that. So it's a bar that I really like to collect, actually.
Yeah.
And there's actually 2 variations of this. There's one, you see, this bar has a little dot in the center, or has no dot in the center of the bull logo. There's also a variation of the same bar that has a dot on the center of that as well.
Man,
I think they're both 5,000 minted. So
that's wild. I didn't realize it was that rare. But I'll tell you what, you said you paid $200 for.
So last week I paid up $180 something for this bar, and I was like, I don't know if I overpaid for this. I'm sure I did, because silver is not $180 an ounce. But this week a second bar was up for bid, and I was like, I'm gonna grab this one too, because me at SBS, I need to have duplicates. I grab one for myself, then I put one on the store. So I was going after this bar, and I tell you, T, I tried my darndest. And this one got bid up past like 250 or 240, I think, and I couldn't get it. There were 4 or 5 other individuals all willing to pay over $200 an ounce for this bar, and I literally lost. I got beat out on the second one. So when it comes down to certain vintage pieces, I mean, most people don't care, but then there's a small subset of people that become very obsessive about things, right? So,
well, some people might scoff at you and I and those like us that collect the vintage bars, and but a lot of times those same people are coin collectors who will pay thousands of dollars for the coin they want, and whether that's 1909 SVDB or you name it, whatever coin they're after, they won't even think twice. If they see it and they want it, they'll buy it.
Exactly.
Yeah, the bottom line is, whether you're a coin collector or a vintage silver bar stacker, stack what you want, collect what you want, what you like. Here's
Yep.
a waffle back. And I recently learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was under the impression, and by the way, I'm a Hoosier, so Silvertown started out in Winchester, Indiana, still there. And although they were bought by a larger company, but either way, I was
Yeah.
under the impression that the waffle backs were more rare than like the flat back variety.
Uh-huh.
And that's not always the case. Do you know about
Well,
that?
well, that's an interesting question. I would say that waffling is probably less common than not. Either way, I think it's something that's desired by collectors, right? So
It's just a matter of preference, I guess, then, huh? I
yeah.
noticed you have a bunch of JM bars, and
Yeah.
JM like basically goes hand in hand with Engelhard, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were kind of Engelhard and JM were the two big dogs.
Yeah.
JM was actually around for a lot longer. They kind of produce all these acai bars that you see now. Those have a very similar look to the JM bars because it's the same company, right? So Johnson Matthey's no longer producing. Well, that I shouldn't say that. There's actually some newer bars, I think, probably being released by Asahi that are kind of trying to go back to that old school poured JM feel. So I've seen some more modern Johnson Matthey bars that have been released into the market actually as of late. But
Really?
yeah, it's an interesting thing. A way for people to get that vintage feel, but they're actually priced like almost like generic silver, right? So it's an interesting thing to kind of keep an eye out for. But when it comes down to like actual vintage JM bars, it gets very confusing. When it comes to JM, there's a lot more variations compared to Engelhard. Now, what you have there is a 5-ounce Silvertown bar, and this, as well as those bars that you have behind there, at least that serialized one, those are vintage Silvertown bars. So those are the old school ones, right? And I can say that definitively because they've got serial numbers on them. There are some unserialized Silvertown bars that are vintage as well, but a lot of the unserialized ones are going to be the more common. They might look vintage, but they're actually more common more modern pours.
Yeah.
Now, the 5-ounce, the 5-ounces are a lot harder to find than the 10-ounces actually, because the 10-ounces have estimated mintage that are quite a bit higher, and so these 5-ounce bars sell at quite a premium compared to the 10-ounces. You can get the 10-ounces at a pretty reasonable premium still, honestly, but the 5-ounces are. I mean, I myself have never paid much less than, I don't know, $250 for one of those things. So that's kind of what at least the going market rate would be at least.
$50
You
an
know,
ounce.
it's not melt value as people like to think on whatnot, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's not something I'd ever let go at melt value on my auctions, right? So when it comes down to let's talk a little bit about auctions if you're interested. I mean,
sure.
that's an interesting way to sell silver. Let's just put it that way. I mean, maybe your experiences are a little bit different than mine, but I would say you definitely have to find your strategy when selling on whatnot, and it can be pretty brutal when you're first starting off.
Yeah.
Until you get your rhythm.
I agree. And, it all depends on having the right people in the room. And if the right people are there that appreciate what you're offering and are willing to pay for it, you're going to do okay. As far as a buyer's perspective, if you go on whatnot, you might, how we talked about from the seller's perspective, from the buyer's perspective, it's the same thing. You can get on a show and the seller is asking ridiculous money for his stuff, and you just click on to the next one and the next one and the next one until usually you can find one who has pretty reasonable prices, and sometimes if you're lucky, especially when auctions just first start out, you might be able to get something at a bargain price and get that nice piece for a really bargain price.
I don't know, like a prospect around for $28, something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And I mean, I've sold things for a much better deal than even that. I mean, it's crazy the types of deals that you can get, and honestly, it's crazy the types of deals that I have a lot of customers on whatnot that will regularly, show me their findings, and I just think to myself, wow. I wish I was there at that time. And they're finding this stuff on Whatnot too, or at their LCS and.
Yeah, some people live on Whatnot, I'll tell you. And I don't know. You know what though? There's so many different vintage bars out there. There were a lot of makers of bars in especially the early 80s.
Right.
That you can find some really rare stuff, and there's a whole group of guys that beyond the Engelhard Jam and Silvertowns, they get into the little niche bars. And man, that's a whole nother area itself.
This bar that you see right in here in front of you is exactly an example of that. I mean, I don't know much about this bar, but I found it so interesting. And there was a seller on Whatnot. He didn't buck and chuck this bar, but he had it available, and he made it available, I think, for around $40 an ounce or something like that. And I was like, I'm gonna grab this. This is an amazing bar. And so I just picked it up on Whatnot, and I recently did a short on it because it's my only example that I have. But I was like, I gotta have one of these at least.
This bar, the National Refining?
Yeah, the one right in front of you.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I'm not sure, how much they typically go for, but I felt, I think after all was said and done, I paid like close to $400 for it. But I felt like, it's a beautiful bar. So
yeah,
it was just kind of an impulse buy of mine on one. I was tuned into a show. The guy had the bar, and I said, that's a really cool bar and a pretty reasonable price. I think I'm going to grab it. So, I didn't get a killer deal on it or anything like that, but, I was able to pick up something unique.
You never know when you're ever going to see another one again. So
yeah, right.
When you see it, you better grab it. And we talked about poured bars. We talked about the stamped or machine bars. There's also the extruded bars, and I'm kind of a sucker for these. I do like these California Crown Mint CCM. These are harder to find as well. And do you know, by the way, is there a website other than all Engelhard bars where you can find oddball stuff?
Yeah, the oddball stuff, you really just kind of have to find it randomly is what I've kind of come to find out, because it's very hard to research some of that stuff. And honestly, that's that's part of the reason why I don't go too crazy with the obscure stuff. I love it. There's an unlimited amount of vintage out there that you can collect, but I try to it's very important, I feel, for any stacker, not even just a vintage silver stacker, but any stacker, you got to have some sort of a strategy behind it. And so for my store, for example, there's a strategy behind the store. I limit myself to the types of things that I try to stack so that it's a little bit organized, because it's very easy to just go. I mean, I know that there's stackers out there who will they want one of each type of thing. And I just don't know how they keep track of their stack, really, But as long as they must be some sort of a strategy behind even those stacks. And so as long as you have a strategy, then it's better. Otherwise, there's an unlimited amount of stuff out there to buy, and so you can easily just go overboard, right? So that's really the important thing. You don't want to go overboard, right? Because it's about preserving your value, not going overboard and buying more than you should, And BR Mackey. That's
you know the story, huh?
I don't know the story. You can tell me maybe the story, but I just know that I've got a friend of mine, Savage Stacker. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Savage. But I think I'm not sure if he's got one of these bars, but I know he was saying he definitely wants to have one of them to stack at least. So you might have one. It's a grail bar for him.
Yeah, this is a weird, obscure one, and basically, it was a company that was recycling silver back in the day, and in that process, BR Mackey and Sons used chemical in the process to recapture the silver, and ultimately put their staff and their employees at risk, to the point where they were being poisoned.
Oh my gosh!
By the process, and they call it a blood bar because the first thing to go are the lungs. So the employees, as they're on the line, were coughing and blood and things like that, and allegedly, and so they call it the blood bar. Because unfortunately, one of those employees died, and there were charges put against the owner of the company. And it's quite a interesting story. and
There's a
history.
lot of there's a lot of interesting stories. That's the interesting part. I mean, I just recently did like an article on the story of elemental. There was a huge scandal, right, with Ohio Precious Metals. Actually, I actually picked up some
OPM.
yeah, I picked up some OPM rounds from you, and I knew that there was kind of like that weird history. So then after I picked them up from you, I started doing more research, and I made a small video about it and stuff like that. And they have some pieces out there that are pretty collectible. Like this piece is elemental piece as well. And this is like a nice 2-ounce chunky round here, just like that chunky bar in your hand.
Yeah. Well, elemental, that's not the same as OPM though, right? Ohio.
Well, so I think Elemental was a larger company, and so they were OPM was kind of under the umbrella of Elemental, from my understanding.
I see.
Yeah, it's kind of like how you've got A-Mark right now, and they own a whole bunch of companies, right?
Yeah. I love these little chunky ones. Matter of fact, I think I picked up 1 or 2 of these from you on your auction. And a matter of fact, when you first started out your channel, you were nice enough to send me a little sample pack here, which I appreciate. I still keep it in the.
You still got it.
Separated it, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, but hey, man, I know you've got work today, and I need to go to work as well. But this is fun chatting about the thing that you and I are both passionate about. Silver bar, vintage silver bars. And as your stack grows or collection grows and mine grows, I say we better do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this was a relatively unstructured call, and we didn't really have a game plan going in, but I think absolutely we should definitely make this a regular thing. Because, there's not a whole lot of channels out there that cover vintage. I mean, there's Silverstruck, there's a few guys out there, but it would definitely.
I'm glad you brought his name up because he is the man.
He really is. Yeah.
I have an appreciation, obviously. You have an appreciation and expertise, and so does he. So I'll put your link down in my video description. I'll put his link down in my video description. And if anybody thinks, well, maybe there's something to this, maybe I would like to stack with style and not just fill tubes with buffaloes, check out the guys who have been doing it a while. And that's my encouragement to anybody who wants to get into vintage. And I mean, you could start off with something like this, and it grows from there, Thanks for the time, Silver Bar Stacker. I really appreciate it, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to doing it again, T.